Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another live community classroom with Michaels. We have our friend Marley Bird with us today to learn to create this adorable baby sweater. My name is Renee L. from Yarn Inspirations, and I'll be helping with any questions you might have during today's class. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we'll make sure that Marley answers them. While we're getting ready to kick things off, let us know where you're watching from. Over to you, Marley.
All right. Hey, everybody. How are you? I love looking out there in the gallery view. I see a lot of familiar faces. Hi, Barbara. Nice to see you there, my friends. Okay, guys, so this class is all about a baby sweater, right? There's a super cute baby sweater, and all of a sudden the pattern is no longer on my screen. Don't you love it when that happens? It's the Caron top-down pullover, and it says 6 months. If you've never made a sweater before in general, this is a pretty good starting point. It'll introduce you to some fairly easy back shaping and then raglan shaping for the arms and the upper body, and then you separate that out so that you can make the sleeves on their own and the body, like actual body portion, on its own. You go back after the fact, pick up stitches for the ribbing. So if you are, I'm going to say, an advanced beginner, meaning you know how to knit, you know how to purl, you know how to do ribbing, because you'll have to know how to do ribbing, and you are adventurous enough to go into this with an open mind and just like, you know what, I'm going to try this out. It's just sticks and string. I think you can absolutely make this project, especially given that we are using the brand new Caron Baby Cakes. It has some wonderful colors in it, so we don't have to worry about any sort of color placement as we're working along. We can just go with the flow and let the colors land wherever they might. Now, having said that, when we do go back to do the sleeves of the piece, if you wanted to try and find some way to coordinate so that the stripes sort of match on the sleeves of the body, I mean, you might be able to get really close, at least to where each sleeve matches each other. You could put extra time in to figure that stuff out. Or if you're just like, it really doesn't matter, be like, you like the sweater because I made it, right? so you can totally be that way too. It's fine. It's your prerogative. But it's a fairly straightforward pattern for somebody who is experienced. For as a new knitter, you might be like, gosh, I'm not really sure what they're doing. So today, what I thought I would do is I would approach this as, let's jump in. Let's start this pattern together. It's written for 6 months all the way up to 24 months. Let's talk about how we work back and forth to begin with to get that back shaping. And I'll explain to you what the back neck shaping is for. And then we'll begin by casting on stitches and then start to work in the round and create our raglan shaping. Okay. That's probably going to take up most of the class. From that point, I am going to look at the pattern with you guys and kind of point out some areas that might trip you up a little bit just to help you along. And as always, if you have questions as we're going along, don't hesitate to leave a message right here in the chat. That's why everybody is here to help us out. And as I'm knitting, they can jump in and say, hey, Marley, we have a question. All right, everybody good with that? Cool. So the pattern itself is in the chat. It's right now. So if you don't have a link to it, you can go over there and check that out. I am going to do a screen share if that is all right with everybody. Oh, maybe not. Oh my gosh, this is when my computer wants to. Nope, we're not going to do a screen share because it doesn't want to do it. So you have the pattern in front of you. You're just going to have to follow along with me, okay? Because for whatever reason, it's not the program. It's like my thing just doesn't want to work. So it is what it is. Okay. Oh, wait, here it is. I got it. Got it. Look at me, look at me. Okay. So this is the pattern. I know, right? The top down knit pullover. I just want you guys to be able to see what's going on here. And you can see that it's Caron Baby Cakes. Baby Cakes, I think, is a worsted weight. Yep, it's a size 4 worsted weight yarn. Depending on what size you're making. And these are 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and 24 months. It will determine how much yarn you need. I'm also going to throw out there that if you are somebody who wants both sleeves to match up, you might end up needing an extra ball just to get the yarn to where the colorway is you need it to be to get both sleeves to match up, but I will let you decide that as we go. I will tell you personal experience with making stuff for kids. If you're trying to make this for a kid to wear right now, you better knit real fast because they grow really fast. If you want to make sure that this fits, always go up a size bigger. You know what I mean? So like if the kid is 6 months right now, like my 6-month-old was in gear clothes by the time he was 9 months old. So if that's the case for you, I'm just going to recommend always going up a size, just because it just can't be really like just too big. One size bigger is not going to be too big for the child. We have a gauge listed down here as 18 stitches and 24 rows, and it says that's on larger needles and stockinette stitch. It does not indicate if that is stockinette stitch in the round or flat though. So rule of thumb for most patterns, when something is in the round, they give you a gauge that is also in the round, but I don't know for this. So what I'm saying there is this: if you are doing your gauge swatch flat and you're coming out to this particular gauge, but you find as you start working in the round, all of a sudden, maybe your row gauge is shorter a little bit. You might have to adjust your needles, okay? If you want to check your stitch gauge in the round, you could always just work up several rounds and then measure it and see how it fits. If it doesn't, you could rip it out and start again if you wanted to do that, but I will leave that up to you, okay? As I look up here in the abbreviations, nothing here really crazy. I'm going to talk about how to do this make one. That's purely the increase to create the raglan shaping. So that gives you the shaping at the top of the body. So we'll learn how to do that. But everything else you should, in theory, know how to do. Okay, you should know how to do. The instructions are written for the smallest size, and if necessary, you'll have parentheses where the other sizes are. One of the beautiful things about Yarnspirations patterns is they do the color coding. So if you wanted to follow along of, hey, I'm making the 24-month, I'm always going to follow the blue color. You can kind of mark that out. Or if you're ever in doubt, use your own highlighter and highlight the numbers that pertain to you. The yoke, if you don't know what the term yoke is, that's the top of the sweater. That's like the neck coming down around the chest to the armholes. That's the yoke. So it says, this is a pullover that is worked in one piece from the top down. The yoke is worked in rows, then joined in the round after the neck shaping. Body and sleeves are then knit in the round. So we are going to work flat to start, and then we're going to go into working in the round. And you do have two different size needles. The smaller needle will be used for the ribbing later. You're going to use the larger needle for the majority of your work. Okay, so we're back to my face. As we're going to start up here, we're going to work back and forth. When we cast on our number of stitches and we're working back and forth to shape the back of the neck, if you were to look, I'm going to try to turn, look at the body. Can you see how the back of the neck is raised up a little bit more than the front? Like if you're looking at a body, your body mechanics, your neck is not right here. It's like towards the front. Okay. You kind of have this here. Have you ever put on a shirt or a sweater, especially like a boat neck, and it's always like cutting you off because it's always wanting to come back? Okay. That's because it doesn't have any back shaping. So what you're essentially creating when we do this back and forth back shaping at the start, we're making the fabric on the back of our sweater a little bit taller to make the front drop a little bit so we aren't strangling the baby. Okay. Same thing holds true if you come across this for adult patterns. The back of the neck shaping, it just gives you that little extra lift so that you don't get choked out the whole way. All right. So what we will do is we're going to cast on a number of stitches, and then we're going to work back and forth across the needles in rows. And we're going to do our increasing. We're going to begin our increasing. We're going to be placing markers. And yeah, let's start with that. All right. So I'm going to switch to my camera view down here to my hands. If you guys are all ready to go, you can grab whatever ball of yarn you want. I think I'm going to go with the colorful one. I mean, surprise, surprise. Rainbow is my favorite color, y'all. And with cake yarn, you can pull from the outside or the inside. It's totally up to you. One of the beautiful things about this yarn is the colors are carefully curated together, and they literally just go from one to the next. And if you wanted to cut this up and only use certain colors, you could. I mean, you could do whatever works best for you. Okay, so I'm going to try and find the starting here. Okay. For me, I love to use the long tail cast on for practically every single pattern I do. And the biggest reason I love using long tail cast on for top down is it gives a very nice, stable, structured cast on where we will later go back and pick up stitches. All right, so this little swatch here, this is done to bottom up. But if we, let me see if I can, that's not a good option. when we're up here and we have a long tail cast on, having a really stable stitching up here that we then go into to pick up stitches allows us to have a neckline that's not going to overstretch and get out of shape. So if we were to use like a backwards E cast on or something with less structure, it's not that it's going to come out terrible. It's just that it doesn't come out nearly as nice as a long tail cast on, in my opinion. So you can do whatever cast on you want, but I recommend a long tail. If you've never done it before, you want a long tail, just as the terminology states, because we're going to use the tail and the working yarn to make this. Okay. So I'm going to leave this long tail. I'm just guessing it because it's not that many stitches here. And I'm going to do a slip knot and place the slip knot directly onto my needle. And unlike crochet, this slip knot is going to count as a stitch. Is my camera close enough to my hands, or would you guys like it closer?
It's good on my end.
It's good. Like I can go like that. Is that better?
I think that's good too. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that it's good for everybody. All right. So this does count as a stitch. I'm going to take my working yarn. I'm going to put it over my thumb, and my tail, I'm going to put it over my finger. And I'm just going to grasp my yarn very much like a slingshot. Right. So I have my working yarn and my tail. Just going to grab them, separate them apart like a slingshot, go up my thumb, down my finger. You create this window right here of the thumb, swing through the thumb, let it fall off and pull. Now I am going to go rather quickly with this here in this video. Just know that you can always watch the recording, or I have standalone, very easy patterns or videos on my own YouTube channel showing the long tail cast on. Now on this one, I put the working yarn over my thumb. I can switch it up if I want to, and I could put the tail over my thumb. One uses the yarn more than the other. It really doesn't matter which one you do in the grand scheme of it all. You just want to make sure that you are getting these stitches just like so. All right. So I'm going to cast on the 30 stitches for the 6 months. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I think that's 30. I'm going to count just to confirm. 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30. So I have 30. I have a tail left over. I don't like to cut my tail right away. I usually kind of wind it up like in a figure 8, and I create a butterfly. I wrap this around the middle, and then I just twist this, kind of lock it in, just so it kind of just dangles there. And I have it if I need it for seaming or anything in particular. It's just there. I just don't like to cut it right away. Okay. Here we are. It says, do not join. We're going to work back and forth. And yes, I did use circular needles, even though we're working back and forth, because you can use circular needles as back and forth. Okay. I just want to make sure that we're all clear on that. There are some people who might not know that at all. Okay. And the next part, it says row 1 and it says right side. So as I turn my work here, this is going to be my right side. And for me, when we go to pick up those stitches for the ribbing, I'm actually going to hide those little bumps there that I've created by doing the long tail cast on, so they aren't going to bother me. Like I'm like, it's fine. But this is where you're going to want to have some stitch markers ready to go. Now, here is a little tip that you might not know if you're somebody new. Your stitch markers should not take up more space on your work than the total circumference of your knitting needle, because you don't want it to stretch out the stitches that you're making. So like these here, these are little stitch markers I've made. They're just jump rings with a seed bead on it that I've used some like E6000 glue And I just made little stitch, like they're so, guys, they're so easy. Go make a run to Michael's and have fun in the jewelry department. Lord knows I have been. And so you have these little tiny stitch markers. They're super handy. I have one here that looks different. So that way I can use it for like the start of the round when I begin working in the round. And I think I need one more stitch marker. So I just grabbed one, just another stitch marker that I have. I could do anything. But I just don't know where the rest of mine of these are. So it might be time for me to make some more. But you want to use stitch markers. What you're not going to want to do, and even though I love these stitch markers, they are too big to put on here to separate where you're going to need them. If you wanted to like use little bits of yarn and use those as stitch markers, you could do that as well. But I prefer like just these little jump rings. They're just real easy to do and you don't have to fuss too much with them. Okay. So row one, we're actually going to knit now. We're going to knit 2 stitches. So I'm going to start off, I'll just knit 1 and then knit 2. And it says make 1. Well, we're at the cast on edge. So we're already jumping with a make 1. And it's like, what? If you used a different cast on, you're not going to have a whole lot of fabric here to pick up. But because we use the long tail cast on, I have a bar right there that I can pick up. I can pick up from front to back. Can you guys all see what I just did there? I just want to make sure I'm not moving too fast. If I pick up this bar just from front to back and then knit it through the back leg, I'm doing a make 1. Okay. If I happen to use a different cast on, I might not have a stitch there to do. In that instance, I would actually probably purl across and then start the next row as my first row and then make it so that I had stitches there to work with. But am I making sense to everybody? I just want to make sure I'm making sense. If you can nod your head, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much. Okay, so I knit 1 and now I make 1. So that make 1, I've started my increase. Now I'm going to place a marker. PM means place marker. So I'm placing a marker on my right hand needle as long as I can get the stitches on here. Place it on my right hand needle. Now I'm going to knit 1 more. I knit 1 stitch and then place a marker. And I'm going to do another make 1. So I'm going to scoop up from front to back that bar, go into the back leg and knit it. If I tend to get out of screen, Renee, will you tell me, please? I'm trying to make sure I'm in screen.
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay. All right, so I've done my second make 1. So what's going to happen here is we're setting up where our increases are going to happen through the entire yoke of our sweater. That 1 knit stitch right there between these 2 markers is going to remain a knit stitch throughout. And before we get to the marker and after the marker, we're going to be doing increases. We're going to be doing that make 1 increase each time. All right, that's how we're going to create our raglan. So now I have to knit 4 stitches. So knit 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I have to make 1 again. So I'm going to scoop up a bar, go into the back leg. It's a little tricky working it this way with this so few stitches. All right, so there's my make 1. I'm going to place another marker. I will knit 1 stitch, place a marker, and then knit 1. I'm sorry, not knit 1, make 1. And make sure when you do this make 1, you are knitting it through the back leg. You're knitting it through the leg that's the hardest one to get to. If you are scooping it up from the front, and go in through the back leg, that'll be what you want to do. So there's my make 1. Again, so there's 2 raglan spots, right? Now I'm going to knit 14.
Oh, Marley, we're going a little bit low for the camera.
Oh, thank you.
No worries.
All right, so I'm going to count 14. So that was my make one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And now I'm going to do another make one. Place a marker. Knit one. Place a marker. Make one. And knit 4. My guess is that without going forward and looking at this, these knit 4s, that's the start of our sleeve. All right, so make 1, 2, 3. So I'll talk about this in just a second. We knit 4, and then I'm going to make one again. Try not to split your yarn. I make one, place another markers. I knew I needed more markers, so I'm just going to place that one there. And then knit one. Place a marker. I'll just place that one. And then make one. And then knit 2. Doesn't look like much, right? I want you to think about this. Over here, this is the front of our sweater. These 2 stitches here and these 2 stitches here. Well, now there's 3 because there's a make one there, but you know what I mean. So we have 2 and 2. Those are the front of our sweater. We had a make one, a knit 1 stitch, and a make one. So that's the start of the front of our raglan. This over here is the start of the front of our raglan. This is the start of our sleeve. This is the start of our sleeve. Those are the raglan on the back of our project. And then this is the back of our sweater. Now you might be like, well, okay, clearly there are not enough stitches here at the front to make the front complete. And you're absolutely right. What you're going to notice is that when you get, it says beginning working in rounds, we're going to cast on 10 stitches. So at some point we cast on 10 stitches here, and that ends up being the front. So that's why we're creating all of this fabric here to lift the back of our sweater. Is that clear for everybody? So to make sure, good, thank you. All right, so the next row we just purl. So I'm going to pick up my work and I'm just going to purl back. When I come to a marker, I'm just going to slip it. Now, one thing that if you're an older knitter, or maybe you're a knitter who's been taught that anytime you start a row, you should always just slip your first stitch. I am going to tell you not to do that on this project. If the designer wanted you to slip that first stitch, they would tell you to do so. And when you slip that first stitch, you're actually just elongating that first stitch across 2 rows. And so given the nature of this design in particular, that might not be what is intended to happen. So even though you might be used to slipping that first stitch at the first of every row, try to just go ahead and knit it or purl it as indicated in the pattern, okay? For me, I never, like I shouldn't say never, I so seldom slip that first stitch because I always forget, you guys. It doesn't matter how many clues I have. I mean, I could have blinking lights that say, stop, don't do it. And I'll just like go right on through. It's like I'm a toddler. It's crazy. It's just insane, but I'm just purling back. And as you can see, because I don't want my marker to get in my way, I usually will move my yarn back and move my marker and then put it back towards the front just to get the yarn out of the way of the marker. And I'm just purling across. And I am a continental knitter. Nothing is different from the way I purl or knit. I just hold the yarn in the other hand. So whether you hold the yarn in your right hand or your left hand, in theory, if we're going through the stitches and the anatomy of our stitches are the same, all of our stitches should look the same. All right, so row 2 is just purl. Row 3, it says we're going to knit to next marker and then make one. So remember what I told you, we're always going to keep those stitches between our markers as those knits. So you're going to do a make one before this one and a make one after this one when indicated. There might be a time where maybe you'll only do a make one out here and a make one out here because you don't need any more stitches for the sleeve, but you'll have to go with what the pattern tells you. All right, so we're going to knit to the marker. So there's my marker. I'm going to do a make one. So I'm going to grab that bar from front to back, go into the back leg of that stitch and knit it, slip my marker, knit one, slip my marker, make one. So essentially we're just increasing all the way around. So it says repeat from star 3 times more and then knit to the end. So we're going to increase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. All right. So I did my increase. I'm just going to knit over to my next marker. You guys can do the same. Now there are different types of increases out there. There's a knit front and back. There's a make one right, a make one left. There's so many different ways to do increases. So when you're coming across different patterns, it is always important to look at how the designer intended for you to do those increases. For this pattern itself, if we went back up to the abbreviation area, in the make one section, it told me to make sure we do them like this. And that's why I'm showing you how to do it in this manner. This is actually one of my preferred ways of doing it. It looks pretty good when you're going along, and it's easy to remember because you're just scooping up that strand and then you work it. If you think about working it through the leg that's the hardest to get into, you won't get a hole. If you work it through the leg that's the easiest to get into, you're going to get a big old gaping hole. All right. Did I do a make one over here? I did. Okay. Just making sure. I start talking and I forget. So I'm to my marker. I scoop up just one strand, go into the back leg, slip my marker, knit one, slip my marker, make one again over here. And then go to the next 2 markers. This goes relatively quickly here at the beginning. And when you start getting a whole bunch of stitches on here, though, that's when things start slowing down just a bit. So it's kind of tricky at the start. You're like, oh man, I'm going to get this sweater done in no time. I've got plenty of time to make like a blanket for the shower. And the next thing you know, you're just like, okay, this is never ending. So just word to the wise. All right, so we went all the way to the end. We have 8 more stitches than we had before. Turn our work, and we're going to purl because we're creating stockinette stitch. It's a stockinette stitch sweater. So I'm just going to purl all the way back. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to ask Renee if there are any questions. See how we're doing.
None just yet. I think we're all just mesmerized watching you.
Oh yeah. All right, that works.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions in their, in their working or in their washing, please feel free to drop them in the chat.
Yes. I'm going to keep going because what the instructions tell us is to repeat the last 2 rows twice more. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4 more rows of just working those increases. So we'll work it after this row. It would be, we do an increase row, a purl row, and an increase row and a purl row. So I'm just going to go through and do that. So that way we can get to where we have hopefully the correct number of stitches that we need to just cast on and then keep going. The good news is by learning how to do this make one and then the slip marker, if you were to read ahead in the project itself, you can see that. I mean, that's basically what you're doing for the entire time that you're working on the yoke. The next big revolutionary time, so to speak, would be dividing for the body and the sleeves. And for that, it's pretty easy if you read through it and just kind of, take it step by step. You're essentially just going to take all those markers, all the sleeve stitches you have between those 2 markers. You're going to set them aside. You're going to put them on some scrap yarn and set them aside so that way you can get back to them after you finish the body. So it's really, like I said, this is a pretty good first time project. It's good because it has the thicker yarn. You don't have to worry about changing colors because the striping happens all on its own. Using size 8 needles, for the body, it's not that hard. It's pretty easy to handle here. I'm curious how hard it's going to be for me to have just that number of stitches around my needle, because 80 stitches around a 16-inch needle, that's a little snug for me. It's not too snug, it's just a little snug. All right, so I'm going to give you a little tip here, because I tend to forget all the time what I'm doing. Like because obviously I like to talk quite a bit. I'm looking for a Post-it note that I have here. And of course I'm not finding it. So what we're going to do, I'm going to grab my little thing here. And I know that I'm going to repeat the last 2 rows. So I'm going to repeat row 3 and row 4, and I'm doing that 2 times. Okay. So for me, because I'm, old school, I will go like, okay, I'm coming back to do row 3. When I finish row 3, I'm going to put a hash mark. And if you notice, I said finish. I don't want to put it beforehand, because say I have to set this down and come back. If I already have my mark there, my mind is going to be like, oh, I already finished row 3. I need to move on to row 4. No, I want to mark after complete. All right. It's little tricks I have to play on my own brain, y'all. So I'm going to set this here. We're going to do row 3. So we're going to work our increase. And when it's all done, I'm going to put a little hash mark there. If you don't want to use this, you could do a little hash mark like on the pattern itself. If you have some other way to hold on to that, you can do that. I'm just totally up to you. For me, I pen and paper works great. So I'm just going through, make sure I'm in camera. And every time I get to my marker, I'm just going to do that make one on either side of that one knit stitch. Okay, that's the raglan. It's the raglan section. And then right here, I'm going across my sleeves. This is the top of the sleeves. Maybe it's like the side of the neck. And then here's the other raglan. Slip my marker, knit one stitch, slip my marker, raglan. Ooh. Another thing that you could do, which is a little bit more advanced, is you could treat these as short rows. You might come across a pattern that has you do neck shaping with short rows. I do that quite a bit in the patterns that I design, because I just like the way they work up, especially when I'm able to use German short rows, and just hike up that back part just a little bit. That little bit makes things so much better in the quality of the design. And it can be done in crochet as well. Like working the neck shaping in crochet, I think, is something that is sometimes forgot, especially in a lot of these newer patterns that are just essentially big rectangles being put together. You can forget about that neck shaping. But if you're doing something very intricate with a thinner weight yarn in crochet, I definitely recommend just a little bit of shaping. It does not hurt. It's not a must, but it helps just with the overall fit of something. Depends on the look you're going for. All right, so I finished row 3. This is where I would put a tick mark. And those of you who've been following me for a long time, you probably already know this, but the reason I use my own tick marks is because when I was a young mom and my kids were learning to, draw and write and color and do all the things, they would love to come over and just start making their own marks on my stuff. And so I could always tell what was their mark and what was my mark. And if I used a counter, they would adjust the numbers on the counter and I would never be able to tell where I was. So I began to never rely on a stitch counter or a row counter, because I just could never rely on where it was, because my kids always got a hold of them. Nowadays, I will use a row counter that acts as a stitch marker. And so you can move it up so you can see what rows you're on and such. I do that quite a bit. And I think I have a video how to make those as well, if you're interested. Really simple, really simple, like really simple, you guys. I am nowhere near an advanced jewelry maker like Meredith from Beadalon or Jill from Jill Weisman Designs. Like that is not, it's not where I am. But that is the beauty of these classes with Michaels, is they teach you everything you need to know, and they have all the supplies at their stores for you to go and get them. And so even though you're at the store getting your Caron cakes, you can swing by, grab yourself some jewelry supplies to make some items for your knitting or your crochet. And all of a sudden you are a much more well-rounded crafter. And it's something fun to do. These are the conversations, you guys. I'm just purling back.
I think we need to make a project of like a lock for your stitch counter.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Lock it up so the kids can't take it.
Anything, you know, and it used to be, I don't know if they still exist. Red Heart used to have like a little finger ring that you could do to push your stitch count or row count on. And it was super cool. And my son thought it was like a Green Lantern ring. So, and this is years ago. So he took it and he was like, look at these numbers. And I'm like, I literally can never use anything because they would just use them up. And I'm like, oh, all right. But the tick marks on my own piece of paper, I know what's mine and I know what's theirs. And so it made it very easy. So to this day, I am so old school. Like I use Post-it notes and notepads and all the things. All right. Let's see, how are we doing on time? I'm doing pretty good. I'm going to get through this. All right, so I'm going to try and knit as quickly as I can. Are there any more questions, Renee?
Nope, none so far.
Oh, you guys are just so advanced out there, not asking any questions. Killing me here.
Someone said we still exist in terms of like loving analog solutions, and we still exist, just found one, but still using a pad. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I have an iPad, I have, you know, my laptop, my phone, my computer, all the things. But when I have to sit down and if I have to sit down and figure out like adding up how much money I owe somebody or tallying up how much yardage I need of something or whatever, I inevitably, you guys, will write all the numbers down on a piece of paper and then grab my calculator and add them together. Like it's, did I do the increase there? I did, right? Yeah. So it's just one of those things. Yeah.
Carolina said, I'm curious, why would, for example, a KFB increase not work here?
Okay, so it technically would work. However, the purl bump that is left from doing a knit front and back, I'm going to just do one here real quick just to show you. So that purl bump right there would show up, and it would show up right next to that purl stitch, or that, I'm sorry, it would show up right next to that knit stitch. And then you don't have a stitch on the other side to do a knit front and back, right? Because we're creating a stitch in between there. So the way the pattern is written is you don't have a stitch there to create a knit front and back. So for example, the pattern says to knit until you get to the marker and then make one. So if I did that, I would knit to my marker. And then if I did a knit front and back, I'm like, oh, I don't have one. Now, if you're a savvy knitter, you could be like, oh, that means I'm going to knit to one before my marker and do a knit front and back. Okay, you could do that. And then you as a savvy knitter know that you could always knit one. And then you could be like, oh, my one stitch after my marker, I could also do a knit front and back. Now, what that does is it leaves that little purl bump from the knit front and back, and a little purl bump. So you have to decide, do I like that purl bump? Do I want to do a purl front and back? So that way I can get a bump. Let's see, I got to remember, a purl front and back. Is that how that works? I haven't done it in so long. No, I didn't do it right. Let's see, I got to think through here. A purl and then a knit. Is that how it is? There's a way to do it where you can make it so that the purl bump is on, like, it's like symmetrical. Did I do it right? There's like a purl bump right there and then a knit in the next one. I don't know. It's just way more thinking. But if you are a savvy knitter and can make those adjustments on your own, there's no reason you can't do that. I mean, I for one, created so many top-down sweaters where I use knit front and back instead of a make one. So it's totally up to you. It's just you have to remember that you don't, like right now when I do this make one, I don't actually have a stitch there. right now, right? And having said that, there are some people that do make ones, they pull from the yarn underneath and the yarn underneath. And so like there's different ways to do a bunch of these increases. But like I said, when you're picking up a pattern like this, you want to look at how the designer chose to do the increase for whatever you're making. I feel like I forgot to do something there, but I don't know. And use what they're using. Did I make sense? I feel like I was all over the place. Please tell me if I made sense.
Yeah, Carolina said, okay, I see, that makes sense.
Okay. It's all a matter of choice, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all just, it's the texture of the stitches and how you want it to look. I mean, I have friends who would treat this as they do that. And then on this one, they might knit it, but when they come back, they'll slip it, or on this one, they'll slip it, and the next one they'll knit it, which is cool. However, it creates extra tension right there, because if I'm slipping it, I still have that yarn going behind there, right? So it's still, it's not as flexible as an actual knit stitch would be. So you have to be aware of that depending on how the fit of the sweater is. So there's so many things to consider when you're talking about designing sweaters or adjusting sweaters. So if you are not a savvy knitter, I sound like Johnny Depp, savvy. If you are not a savvy knitter and don't really know how to make those adjustments, just go with the way the pattern is written. It'll just make your life easier. All right, so I'm going to purl back, and then we can actually like cast on stitches here. And typically for all the research and sweater design and stuff I've done, I've read that like adding about 1 inch to 1.5 inches on the back of the neck is usually pretty good. It's a good enough for what you need. And that's about what we're adding here, is about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. So that's good. Purl across. I really like these colors. Did you see these colors, Renee? Look how pretty they are. They're so
I know. It's such a perfect like muted rainbow. It's so springy. Like I know it's still cold here. I'm sure it's probably still cold for all of y'all if you live in a place that gets cold, but like it's making me very excited for spring.
Yeah.
A little too early.
Yeah, these colors are great. And I know that there are some people who are a little bit in an older generation and stuff who might be like, oh, you can't use these colors for girls. They're more boy colors. Well, I'm telling you right now, you can use these colors for anything. Your sweet, loving mama who's getting the sweater for their child will love anything you make them. I would have loved this for my daughter. Well, I've made so many things for my daughter in these colors and my sons.
Yeah, it's so interesting how like the aesthetic has changed. I feel like baby colors is just pastel now because there's so much you can do. You know, people theme their nurseries with different things. So I feel like this is such a great all around colorway for almost anything baby.
I have a friend who did a nursery theme, and it was all creams and browns, like dark brown, light brown, cream, and some white. Like it was very what you would think would be very bland. And it was so pretty. It was just so pretty. And you walked in there and it was super soothing. And come on, y'all know me. Rainbow is literally my favorite color. Like I love color. More color, the better. But so I went to her not her shower, her house, to the room, and I was like, wow, it's so serene and so soothing and so peaceful. And I was just like, huh, like I wouldn't have guessed, because I mean, I guess I should say I wouldn't have guessed. I would have never put those colors for a baby's place. Just personally, I wouldn't have, because I wouldn't have thought about it. Now I would absolutely do it. Absolutely.
Totally. It's just really classic and clean.
Yeah.
And it's just like nice and calming to be there, like a spa.
Absolutely. It totally is. All right. So that would be my number 4. And I did 2. So now I'm good there, right? So this is where I would draw the line. This is the line. This is where I draw it, everybody. So when you're asked, there's the line. No. Sorry. These are the jokes, people. Deanna, you're supposed to laugh at that. It's really funny. Okay, there it is. All right, so it says beginning working in rounds. So what we're going to do now, we could go through here and we could count our stitches. I'm not going to worry about that, but I would suggest you do it just to make sure you didn't accidentally miss an increase here or there. And if you did, it's all right. You can put one in later. We're going to begin to work in the round. So we're going to cast on 10. So we're going to cast on 10 stitches. And then that's for my size. If you're doing one of the other sizes, it's 12 or 14. And then we're going to follow along with the way things are written. And so for this, we're going to knit 5, and then it says place marker, beginning of round. So those 10, they're going to the first 5, and then we're going to place our marker. That's where I have my fun little different marker here. And then we're going to begin our round, and we're going to continue doing our increases here as it's indicated. Okay. I'm going to keep reading so that we do round 1, round 2 is knit. Round 3, it looks like knit to marker. Okay, so it's another increase round. And then it tells you to work 1, 3, 4, or 7 rounds even. So you're going to do 1, 3, 4, or 7. So depending on what you're going to do. And when it says even, that just means you're going to knit. You're not doing any increases. And then we're going to divide for the body. So we won't get through all of that, but pretend I was making one of the larger sizes. If I had to do 7 rounds even, I would write 7 rounds, and I would just kind of go like that. So that way, when I got to my 7 rounds, I would be able to do a tick mark every time I got, finished a round. You know what I mean? Because I'm doing the smaller size, 1 round, and it's going to be shocking. I won't have to do a tick mark because it's not going to matter. But then you'll divide for the sleeve. So let's just jump in here. So the first thing, it says cast on, and you're like, well, Marley, we did the long tail cast on before. What am I going to do now? I'm going to tell you what I would do. If this were mine, I have the right side facing me. I would go between these 2 stitches. I'm going to go between them just like this, like I'm literally between them. You guys see? I'm going to yarn over and pull a stitch through, extend it, swivel, and put it on. It's not a knitted cast on. This is a cable cast on. I'm going to go between the stitches. So that's 1. So between the stitches, yarn over, pull up a loop, extend, swivel, and scoop. Now that's 2. It looks like 3 because we went between these 2 to start, remember? So don't get caught up. We've only done 2. Go between, yarn over, come up, extend, swivel, and scoop. Between, swivel, and scoop. And we want to have 10 of these, or however many you're doing. I like this particular cast on because it gives me a nice edge. So when I pick up stitches, I'm not going to have droopy neckline. It's easy to work into these stitches as I'm working around. They aren't flopping. They just look like really pretty stitches. This is actually one of my favorite cast-ons if I'm doing something that I want a really pretty, like that cable-y kind of looking corded edge. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Because that one, don't get lost. That one came over here. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10. So I've cast those on.
Marley, just before we go forward, just clarifying where we are in the pattern. Carolina said at this point we have 8 rows, right? Before joining in the round?
Let's count my rows. Yes, that's what I have.
Perfect.
Because we did 4 rows, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep. We have 8 rows, what we've completed.
Awesome.
So, and then I just did my cast on. So this is the first round of the cast on. And you want to make sure you have the knit side facing you. You should have the knit side facing you. Okay. I'm going to knit 5. So at this point, now that I have all those cast on, now I'm going to go into the stitch and actually knit. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to place my marker. That's going to indicate the start of my round. Now what's really happening here as I push these up towards this is now my front. These are my sleeves. This is my back. All right, so here we go. So we've knit our 5 or 6 or 7, depending on what size you're making, placed our marker for the beginning of the round. Now we're going to knit to the next marker. So We're going to knit across the next set of 5 stitches, and then going into our work we've already been doing. And we're going to make one. Slip our marker, knit one. Slip our marker, make one. Okay. What's interesting to me by doing it like this, guys, I'm going to talk through this. Cast on 10, and then we knit 5, placed our marker at the beginning of the round. But when I come back over here, I'm going to be knitting across those again. You know what I mean? Like, so now all of a sudden I have just one row more, one more row of stitches right there on those 5 stitches than on that side. I guess it really doesn't matter. It's just something to make note of. I mean, it must not matter, but that would be my first hesitation is why. I mean, all right, okay, maybe it doesn't matter. Just one of those, I mean, it is only one row, but still. I'm just gonna keep going here. You guys pretty good with this so far? Any questions with any of this?
None so far, so please drop them in the chat if you have any questions.
One thing that you are going to notice is that one knit stitch that we are doing between those markers, it gives this really cool like line there. Can you see that? You're going to get this really cool demarcation essentially of the raglan section. Yeah, it's a nice little detail. I know that, I mean, I've done some sweaters where between the stitch markers, I'll actually have more than one stitch. And like I've done some cables, so I'll have the cable line be the demarcation of the raglan.
I love that.
Oh, I love it too. It's really cool. I think I actually did that as one of the things, the knit along I did here a couple years ago for Yarn Inspirations. If I remember correctly, all of those patterns, they all just blur together. You don't know, like if you don't know, I mean, I don't just teach, I'm also a designer. So, I mean, that was like 200 patterns ago. So it's, it all kind of blurs together as we go along.
It is just very satisfying to see someone execute a cable. Like,
Oh,
it is
yeah.
just like with really nice stitch definition. If it's in like a really crisp yarn and like
Yes.
solid, it's just delicious to look at. Maybe
Yes.
I'm weird.
No, you are not weird at all. And delicious is the perfect word. Actually, I wanted to learn to knit so that way I could knit cables and knit socks. That's why I wanted to learn to knit. I thought knitting socks was the fanciest thing ever because you've got all of these needles. And I was like, I want to be that cool. And then when I realized that those, like fisherman sweaters growing up, that's what I called them, were fisherman sweaters. I was like, oh my gosh, I could actually make that. I could make that. So I was like, yeah, it's just knit. And I was like, well, let's do this. And so, you know what, I'm not going to pass this real quickly. I am back to my beginning point here. There's no trick here. I'm literally just going to start knitting into that first stitch. I'm not worrying about anything else. Any sort of little gap or whatnot you might get there, we'll be able to clean up later on with our tail or as we pick up stitches. So don't overstress that. Okay. It's not the end of the world if it's a little bit gappy. It's okay. And we're back to our beginning. So as I set this down, that's the start of our sweater. So this is where the neck is. Let's put it up here. This is where the neck is. From here and here, those are my sleeves. This is the front, this is the back, and we would continue on. So I would knit the next round, and then the following round is another increase round. So just like what we did. And then it says repeat the second and third rounds 8 or 9 times. So when we read the second and third rounds, up here, so we're going to read the second and third rounds. How many times? 8 times for me. So then that's where I would start doing my hash marks again. When I was on a knit round, I'd mark it. When I was on an increase round, I'd mark it until I get up to the 152 stitches. And then that's when it says the work the run round even or whatever. That's where this part is down here. Then it says divide for the body and sleeve. So I'm going to talk you through this, okay, rather than showing on here because we're almost out of time. We have our marker or our ring like this as we're knitting along. We have our marker, our marker, our marker, our marker. And when I say marker, it's the two markers, okay, but I'm just putting them on there as one. What will happen is, remember, this is the beginning of our round. So we'll knit across, I'm going to say 22 because that's the size I'm making. And then it says slip the next 32 stitches onto a holder for the left sleeve. So what will happen, most likely, it'll be the stitches either including the stitch between that marker or just after. I don't know because I'm not at that point in the pattern. I don't know. But it will essentially be these stitches here at some point here. Those are all going to go onto a holder, just onto some scrap yarn. Then you're going to cast on 2 stitches, cast on 2 stitches. Do the same cable cast on that we just did for that neckline. All right, so you're going to cast on 2 stitches. Those 2 stitches, that's the armpit. Okay, that's your armpit. Then we're going to knit across 44. That's my back. Then we're going to put these stitches on a holder and we're going to cast on 2 stitches. That's our other armpit. Then we're going to work across to the front. So now you have stitches here and here that are just on some scrap yarn, but you have 22 stitches here, 22 stitches here, you have 44 here, and you have 2 here and 2 here. This is your new working in the round. Okay, these stitches here that are on holder, they're just going to hang out. And when it's time to come back and do those sleeves, you're going to put all of those back on a needle. You're going to pick up stitches right here where the armpit is. And so now you'll have, what was that, 32? So you'll have 32 plus the 2, and then that's going to be your new round for your sleeve. And then you'll do the same thing over here, and that's how you divide out. So for this was top down or bottom up, but it's the same idea. These are sleeves on a holder, just on scrap yarn. There's cast on stitches for the armhole or for the armpit. So if you imagine this coming this way, there's sleeves on a holder, there's the armpit, you work the rest of your body, okay? Then you're going to come back up here, you're going to put all of these back on a needle, pick up stitches here, and you're going to be working in the round for the sleeve, okay? When you do that, you're going to have to use double pointed needles because your 16-inch needles will be they're too big circumference. If you have like a little 9-inch needle, you could try that if you want. I'm not a fan. I prefer double points. Barbara will tell you that. They're my favorite things. But you'll have to use double points right here. And then you'll come up here and you'll pick up stitches up here and do the ribbing. That'll be up in this area. And because we did this type of cast on and our long tail cast on, it'll be easy to pick up those stitches. All right. Okay, I'm going to go back to my face. It's a lot, right? Like an hour class, and you try and get through how to teach, sorry, get to you that weird sort of looking graphic real quick. So trying to get you through as much as you can to work on this particular sweater. The good news is you could get through a majority, if not all of the sweater just with what I've given you here in class. Anything extra you might need, I know for a fact you can find that information on the Yarnspirations YouTube channel, on the Michaels YouTube channel, on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. So the information is out there for you to finish this sweater. But this part here can be the hardest part because if you've never done a sweater and you don't understand what those markers are for, you don't understand how to do the increase, that can be very confusing. All right. Okay. Whew. Is that good? Are we good? Everybody good?
That's great.
Okay. Very good.
All right.
That's all I got.
All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today for this live community classroom with Michaels. Don't forget to share your work with hashtag Make It With Michaels and hashtag Yarnspo. That's YARNSPO, and tag us on all the socials. We love to see what you guys are working on. It is the best part of our jobs. It's why we love doing what we do.
Absolutely.
And just a reminder, you can find more classes on michaels.com and a recording of today's class at michaels.com/classes. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.